Tadej Pogacar is by his own merits the number one rider in the world. At only 23 years of age, the Slovenian has become the greatest all-rounder in the cycling universe, achieving victories in every possible scenario. However, what you might not know is that underneath that image of affability and friendliness hides a real competitive monster, which sometimes makes him get angry, and he makes it clear who the alpha male of the world peloton is. Do you want to hear about some of those times? Well, without any further ado, let another show begin. Pogacar makes things clear to Kwitatowski. The Tour de France 2021 was a real lesson in domination from Tadej Pogacar, who became the boss of the cycling world in that edition. And he especially wanted to demonstrate that dominance over the team that had dominated the Tour de France in the previous decade, the British Ineos Grenadiers. Perhaps the most famous episode was this one, in which Tadej Pogacar, dressed in yellow and in an inconsequential stage a few days before the end of the tour, jumped out of the peloton to placate the Pole, Michał Kwiatowski. The Polish man had tried to escape with the Latvian, Tom Scoins, after a crash in the bunch had damaged several teammates of Pogi's UAE team Emirates. Many did not understand why the leader of the competition performed this act, but we have to go back several days to understand it. The day before the first mountain stage, the then leader Mathieu Van der Poel, along with other great riders like Wout van Aert and Matej Mohoric, jumped out of the peloton, making things really complicated for UAE. At that moment, Michał Kwiatowski, used to doing the gregario duties himself, was laughing at the effort of Pogacar's teammates right next to him. It was the moment when it became clear to him he would never again let Kwiatowski achieve individual glory. Revenge. Pogacar gets angry because of Richard Carapaz. We continue in the tale of the anger of Pogi with the Ineos team in the Tour de France 2021. This time with the leader of the English team and the third place finisher, the Ecuadorian Richie Carapaz. The locomotive of Carchi was having a great competition, being the biggest rival in the mountains for Pogacar along with Jonas Vingegaard. But he found a way to anger the Slovenian champion as we'd rarely seen him angered. On stage 17, finishing on the Col de Portet, Pogacar was left alone with his two climbing rivals on that impressive final mountain pass. Jumbo-Visma's Danish rival collaborated in the chase with Pogi, but not so Richard Carapaz, who stayed behind without giving a single turn to the yellow jersey. It was a mistake, of course. It was the lit fuse that angered Pogacar, who from then on was dedicated towards proving that he was the strongest cyclist of the Tour, and he didn't let the Ecuadorian win a single stage. He certainly owns a doghouse, if you ask me. In a press conference, Pogacar declared that he does not like actors, and that he knew Carapaz was performing high theatre. And although it is a tactic in cycling, when the Ineos rider decided to attack in the last kilometre, he knew he would have to take his revenge, and to make it clear who was the official number one in the world. An incredible display of power, although this duel is sure to have more episodes in the future. The episode with Julian Alaphilippe in Liège. In 2020, and after winning the Tour de France in a surprising way in the legendary time trial of the Planche de Belfi, Pogacar appeared for the first time on the starting line of Liège-Bastogne-Liège, with the intention of winning. And win he almost did, arriving at the last kilometre with a small group of favourites that included his compatriot Primož Roglic, the Frenchman Julian Alaphilippe, and his current teammate, the Swiss Marc Hirschi. In the final sprint, the then newly crowned world champion accelerated hard, and with a strange manoeuvre prevented Pogacar from sprinting and being able to vie for the victory. He then raised his arms prematurely, and Roglic did him some justice by winning on the finish line in one of the greatest fails in cycling history. Pogi was very angry and he complained to the authorities, but in the end he took third place in the Doyen. But it wasn't until the following year that he got his personal revenge, and that was in another of today's greatest upsets in history. The anger of the Flèche Wallonne. In 2021, Tadej Pogacar was ready to triumph in the Ardennes Classic, to redeem himself after Alaphilippe's show in 2020. His first big goal was the Flèche Wallonne, but unfortunately, he couldn't compete on the Mur of Oy against the French world champion, who finally did take the win in that decaffeinated edition. The Slovenian was unable to compete because of strange results for COVID-19 in members of his team. Like with the Italian, Diego Ulissi, on the same day of the competition. Pogacar had a false positive a day earlier, but tested 3 times negative later and had no symptoms of being infected. But the team withdrew, and Tadej was so angry that he complained publicly on Twitter, and then devoted himself 100% to training afterwards. No more and no less than doing a full reconnaissance of Liège, which days later, when he could compete again, he succeeded after crushing Alaphilippe in a new sweet revenge against the Frenchman and against the organisers who prevented him from competing days before. And now, angry in Flanders. It's funny how the audience has been left with this image of a pissed off and angry Pogacar after finishing the Tour of Flanders in 4th place in his first participation, after having been undoubtedly the strongest rider on the pavé walls in the Ronde. A pretty lousy management of the last kilometre in his duel with Mathieu Van der Poel allowed Dutchman Dylan van Baarle and Frenchman Valentin Madouas to come from behind, both of whom fairly took the podium from the Tour de France champion, after he incomprehensibly dropped his hands from the bike's handlebars to complain publicly about it. Knowing Pogi, we know that his statements minutes later had nothing to do with the anger that he really felt. And most amazingly, we are convinced that he will return to win this monument of cycling. He has put a target on the Dutchman, Mathieu Van der Poel, and of course he won't win so easily when he faces Pogi next time out. A duel that promises to be historic in the Spring Classics, and a marvel for us cycling lovers.